In every arena, whether it is martial arts, war, sports, even the Jedi Temple, there is a question that never goes away. Who was the greatest? In this series, we're examining the contenders, not just the strongest Force wielders, not just the most iconic Jedi or Sith, but the ones whose presence alone bent the galaxy, whose form and philosophy redefined lightsaber combat. We have already covered Exar Kun, the brilliant Jedi turned Sith Lord, a master of both sorcery and the lightsaber, a philosopher warrior who fused arrogance with artistry and made his mark not only with his blade, but with the ideas that have scarred the galaxy. Today though, we shift deeper into the shadows, into something colder, something much older, a name spoken in whispers even by the Sith who revere him, a being known not for elegance, but for pure eradication. Tulac Hord. In the Sith legend, he was called the Lord of Hate. They say he killed hundreds, maybe even thousands of Jedi by his lightsaber alone, that his lightsaber technique became the foundation of an entire form, that his rituals could tear apart armies from within, and that even the Sith themselves feared the knowledge that he left behind. But the deeper you look into Tulac Hord's legacy, the less you see. There are no first-hand accounts, no journals, no treaties signed in his name, just scattered holocrons, battlefield scars, and rumors so persistent that they have now become prophecy and legend. So today we're not handing out a crown, we're building a case. Was Tulac Hord the greatest lightsaber duelist of all time? Or was he just the greatest Sith ghost story that was ever told? Well, that's not for me to decide. I'm just here to make the case. But to really understand Tulac, we have to go back, farther than Vitiate, farther than Revan, farther than Naga Sadow or Marka Ragnos, back to the time when the Jedi in their most dangerous exiles tore the galaxy in two. What resulted was a war that would forever change how Force wielders fought. A war called the 100-Year Darkness. This was the crucible in which the Sith were born, a schism within the Jedi when a group of dark Jedi began experimenting with forbidden powers, dark rituals, Force manipulation, alchemy, and the unnatural extension of life itself. The Jedi High Council denounced them, war broke out, and in that war, something fundamental shifted. Lightsabers, once ceremonial weapons and tools of defense, became the primary method of killing fellow Force wielders. For the first time in galactic history, lightsaber on lightsaber combat became commonplace. Jedi fought Jedi. Dark Jedi clashed with old masters. Duels weren't theory anymore. That is how wars were won. And with that shift, the earliest lightsaber forms began to evolve and to change. Form 1 Shi-Cho had been the standard for centuries among the Jedi. It was designed to disarm, to defend, to resolve conflict through posture rather than with precision. But in the 100-Year Darkness, it began to fail. The sweeping wide movements left practitioners vulnerable to razor-edge precision of an opponent that was trained to kill. So a brand new form began to take shape as a response, one built for duels, not for crowds. A form that emphasized economy, precision, footwork, and most of all, lethal intent. This was the birth of Form 2 Makashi, the first lightsaber form built specifically to counter other lightsabers, the ultimate duelist art. And it is here, somewhere in the fires of that war, that Tulac Hord would emerge. We don't know whether Tulac Hord was one of the original 12 exiled Jedi who founded the Empire. Some holocrons suggest that he wasn't even a Jedi at all, that he was something more dangerous. Some suggest he was a dark side mercenary, a wandering killer, a warborn duelist who didn't care for politics or dogma, only challenge. The story goes that while the 12 Dark Jedi were forming their new society among the red-skinned Sith species, that Tulac Hord appeared in their ranks like a ghost in a storm. He wasn't there to lecture about the Force. He wasn't there to build temples, monuments, or even to rule planets. Tulac Hord was there to fight. Not for glory, not even for conquest at first, just to test himself. To test his mettle against the strongest warriors that the galaxy had to offer. And in that pursuit, that is where his legend was born. In other Sith Lords, they saw the dark side as a path to rulership, but Tulac Hord saw it as it was, a weapon, a means to sharpen his instincts, to predict his opponent's movements, to shatter their resolve before they ever raised their lightsaber. Where others sought the throne, Tulac Hord sought the duel. He wasn't like the other Dark Jedi, who after war wrapped themselves in silk and gold, proclaimed themselves gods and kings. Ajunta Pall was buried in his wealth. Karnus Mur was obsessed with immortality. Remulus Drapa built towers so tall that he forgot the world below him. But Tulac did none of that. He wore blackened armor scorched by time and by battle. His robes were plain, his presence terrifying. He didn't want ornamentation, he wanted movement efficiency, a weapon's simplicity. In the chaos that followed the 100-year darkness, he aligned with the Sith not because he believed in their vision, but because they shared his thirst for war. To the Sith, war was commonplace, and the Sith gave him what he wanted the most. They gave him worthy enemies. From this point forward, Tulac would be remembered not as a ruler or as a philosopher, but as something far more rare among the Sith, a duelist. A killer refined through repetition, and a master of lightsaber combat who may have shaped Makashi itself, not as a form of elegance like Dooku would later claim, but as a blueprint for survival and domination. Tulac Hord did not need to talk about his power, he showed it in silence with every cut. He was the warborn mercenary, no jewels, no thrones, just death. He wasn't a philosopher, he wasn't a king, he wasn't a prophet. Tulac Hord was a weapon forged by war, sharpened by ritual, and unleashed without mercy. Where other Sith Lords pursued domination through alchemy, mysticism, or political manipulation, Tulac Hord's method was simpler and more terrifying. He had perfected violence. He didn't rule from a throne, he ruled with his lightsaber. And the closer you look at his life, the more obvious it becomes that he didn't ascend the hierarchy of the Sith through influence or cunning, that he didn't have to. Tulac Hord killed his way there. The Sith Lords of this era, those who came from the 12 exiles, embraced their new empire by embracing the excess of power. Ajunta Pall was entombed in gold, revered as the first of the Dark Lords of the Sith. Carnus Mur bent minds and bodies with alchemy. Remulus Drapa constructed citadels, isolating himself behind walls of obsidian, as too did Darth and Dedu. Each believed that their dominance lay in what they could build, or what they could warp. But Tulac believed power was what you could defeat. He had no obsession with architecture or decadence. Tulac's tomb, located on Korriban, is not grand because of its beauty. It's infamous because of its death traps, illusions, and combat rituals that lie inside. His final resting place was not a tribute to his ego. It was a last challenge, a battlefield wrapped in stone. It was a warning. A cost. Tulac wore no crown, no ornamental robes, no gemstones encrusted into his gauntlets. His armor was blackened with age, scarred, pitted, functional. Likely once red in its original form, it had faded under constant battle. And he kept it not because it was beautiful, but because it worked. Because Tulac Hord did not care how he looked. He cared whether you survived the first 3 seconds of your duel with him. Many in the Star Wars community equate him to a force-wielding Grievous. In many ways, he is the perfect precursor to the General. If Grievous had been born with a deep connection to the dark side, Grievous collected lightsabers from his Jedi victims. Tulac created rituals and techniques that could unmake the Jedi entirely. Grievous fought for vengeance. Tulac fought because fighting was the only time that he ever felt alive. But the key difference, Tulac did not lose. He wasn't a creation of Sith science or a puppet. He was a being who lived only to test himself against Jedi and others, to improve, to refine, to master. And unlike Grievous, who lacked finesse and relied on mechanical savagery, Tulac's style was disciplined. His footwork, his timing, his cuts, everything about his movement points towards a duelist who valued perfect control. He didn't overpower you. Tulac dissected you. Later Makashi users like Dooku would be admired for their elegance, their saber work. Dooku treated lightsaber combat like a fencing match, a noble purist. Dooku's form, his clothing, even his posture all radiated refinement. Tulac Hord treated the blade, though, like a scalpel. He didn't integrate Form 2 into his identity. He was Form 2. He didn't care about elegance, he cared about lethal efficiency. And where Dooku would die in a clean cut at the hands of Anakin, Tulac Hord would leave behind a battlefield full of corpses, and then vanish into the next war. The Sith that walked among monsters. The Sith Empire was fractured in this era. It was a violent place. Dozens of lords vied for control. Armies were raised and extinguished overnight. Planets fell. Slaves became kings, and then corpses. It was chaos. But Tulac Hord thrived in that chaos. But unlike his peers, he didn't carve out a territory to defend. He didn't sit on a throne and wait for challengers. Tulac moved from world to world, system to system, not as a ruler, but as a storm filled with fury and identity, with purpose. If Sith society offered him a position of power, Tulac accepted it only as long as it did not interfere with the next conquest. If they offered him feasts, he declined. If they gave him praise, he ignored it. What Tulac wanted was not respect, he wanted the fight. That was the only thing that he himself respected. And that's what makes Tulac Hord so terrifying. He didn't kill for pleasure, he didn't kill for gold, he killed for understanding. And that's what makes him so hard to dismiss in the GOAT debate. He didn't just survive the ancient empire, he defined it, not through politics or philosophy, but through ritualized combat and the cold, unrelenting repetition of death. But now let's get into specific feats. If Tulac had simply mastered the lightsaber, he may have been remembered as just another duelist, feared, but forgotten. But Tulak Hord did not stop with technique. He took the same surgical brutality, the same obsession with precision, and applied it to war. And what followed were not campaigns, they were obliterations. According to ancient Sith texts, he wasn't a traditional warlord. He didn't rely on armies or numbers. He relied on terror, on rituals, the idea that the battle was over before it began, because you were already losing your mind. To Tulak Hord, the battlefield was not just where victory occurred. This was sacred ground. This is where his blade became the altar. Among Tulak Hord's most well-known feats is his conquest of the Droman system, which would later house the resurgent Sith Empire under Vitiate. This quote comes from the narrative of Star Wars: The Old Republic from an Inquisitor. He took the Droman system with only his lightsaber and the dark side of the Force. With the specifics lost to time, this event is accepted even in Sith records. What little we know though suggests that no massive army accompanied Tulac here, at least not one that took any credit. Legends claim he used dark side rituals to destabilize the enemy before striking, corrupting commanders, fracturing communication, turning allies into enemies with whispered visions and psychic pressure. And when that system fell, it never rose again. Droman belonged to the Sith from that moment forward. Even Luke Skywalker would delete it from the Jedi archives. Even in that period, it remained conquered by the dark side. But here is where we get into his true claim as the GOAT, the greatest duelist in all of Star Wars, the Battle of Yin and Kabosh. Tulak Hord is credited with leading Sith forces to victory in the battles of Yin and Kabosh, where he reportedly slew over 1,000 Jedi. Quote, "During his lifetime, Tulak Hord was considered the greatest duelist of all of the Sith Lords, having conquered the planets of Yin and Kabosh, and having slain more than 1,000 Jedi." This is the most credible claim in support of Tulak's status as the greatest Jedi killer in Star Wars. But even here, we don't know how he killed them. Did he personally cut down thousands over years of campaign? Did he use a ritual? Did he fight them alone, as is implied? Well, this is where the record ends and the myth begins. The first conquest is known to history and myth as the Night of 1,000 Eyes. Sith holocrons recovered during the Old Republic era speak of a battle where Tulak Hord was seen in multiple places at once, striking fear into soldiers from across the battlefield. Some claimed he used advanced Force illusions to manifest false versions of himself. Others described visions of loved ones twisted into mockeries, spectral doubles, or even enemies seeing Tulak's face on their own allies, driving them to madness. If you ever see him in more than one place, run. There will not be a third version. Whether all of this happened or not, the tale reinforces the legacy. A warrior who didn't just beat you, he made you fear yourself before the battle ever arrived. Next is the cult of Veshkar. Coming from another unverified Sith record, this legend describes Tulak Hord's encounter with the cult of Veshkar, a rival darkside sect focused on ritual summoning and group projection. Some accounts suggest that he challenged their high priest to single combat in front of the entire cult, the duel only lasting seconds. It is said that Hord waited, motionless for the priest's first strike. Then he ended him with a single cut. No resistance followed. The cult scattered that day, and the name Veshkar vanished from Sith history. But whether this was a real event or a cautionary tale, it adds to the mythos. Tulak Hord didn't just kill, he made examples. Then you have the Vranskar Massacre, another possible allegory. Some Sith writings refer to a campaign on the world of Vranskar, a battlefield said to be soaked in madness. The legend goes that Tulak Hord entered the battle alone, and when reinforcements arrived later that day, no enemy remained alive, and no other Sith warrior had to draw upon their weapon. Jedi bodies were reportedly unmarked, curled in fetal positions, or found clutching their heads as if attacked from within. Some believe that Tulac performed a mass ritual that weaponized grief, paranoia, and unresolved guilt, causing Force-sensitive minds to implode under the weight of their own shadow. Unfortunately, there is no Republic record of this world, no official battle logs, just ruins, and the Sith belief that Tulac Hord turned one battlefield into a graveyard of the mind. We don't know the details of exactly how he did it, but luckily we do have an idea. And here we discovered that Tulac Hord approached the battlefield unlike any other Sith Lord in the lore. Ritualistically, what is consistently documented in Sith sources is that Tulac Hord used rituals to enhance combat. He didn't use it to pursue immortality. These were not meditative or passive rites, they were weapons. Sith acolytes centuries later would describe his teachings as included Force-induced hallucinations, mass emotional manipulation, amplifying hatred and betrayal, phantom projections used to disorient enemies mid-battle, Force trauma loops, causing opponents to relive past horrors in the heat of battle. Tulac didn't need an army, he was the army, and in a galaxy built on fear, he used ritual as artillery, softening his enemies with madness before ever drawing upon his lightsaber. His conquests were not about political territory, they weren't about taxation of resources, they were about testing himself, refining his form, spreading his techniques like a plague across Sith space. Holocrons containing his knowledge were hidden. Tribes scattered his records, unwilling to let his style give another rival an edge. It was scattered not out of reverence, but out of fear. This is what separates Tulac from other conquerors. They fought to rule, but Tulac fought to perfect. When he reached the limits of war itself, he left behind no monuments, only nightmares. And we believed he did it with Form 2. You cannot talk about lightsaber dueling without talking about Makashi Form 2. It was created during the 100-Year Darkness, the moment lightsaber duels between Force wielders became commonplace, and the limitations of older forms like the sweeping, unfocused Shi-Cho became obvious. What the galaxy needed was a duelist answer to a duelist threat. Makashi was that answer. And while we don't know for certain who created it, holocrons reportedly point to Tulac Hord as one of its first true masters, if not its defining force. The records are scattered. Some Sith tribes deliberately hid Tulac Hord's teachings, afraid of what they could unleash in another apprentice. His techniques, especially his precision footwork, counters, and ability to control the flow of a duel were so advanced that they were seen as dangerous to even other Sith. Unlike later Form 2 wielders who practiced the form as a noble art, Tulac didn't care about elegance. He didn't see the form as a reflection of his personality. He saw it as a path to perfection. The best known Makashi master in the modern era is Dooku. He treated the form as a symbol of aristocracy, graceful, poised, stylish. His saber was curved. His form was theatrical. His technique flowed with pride and personality. But Dooku personalized the form. Tulac became it. His mastery of Form 2 wasn't tied to fashion or expression. He chose it because of raw efficiency, because that is how Jedi and Sith alike fought in this era, blade to blade. This is why Traya would later famously say that anyone not of this era were as children playing with toys compared to the old blade masters. She said that as the personal master of Revan. Tulac did not deal in style points, he dealt in depth. He reshaped the way that Sith viewed lightsaber combat forever, and that is why many call him the duelist god. The legacy reached far beyond his life, carried forward in secret, taught in whispers, and adapted over centuries. But my favorite example of a Tulac Hord duel is his duel with the Sith Lord, the first Dark Lord, Ajunta Pall. In the tradition of the Sith, where power is earned, not given, this is a story that many believe. The claim repeated in later Sith recordings is that Tulac challenged Ajunta Pall after years of service and conquest, and defeated him in a duel of skill alone. No trickery, no force lightning, blade on blade. And in doing that, Tulac proved something terrifying. While the Force is powerful, sometimes the lightsaber is the most influential tool of conquest. That duel, if it happened, was not just a transfer of power, it was a redefinition of Sith tradition. From that point on, the lightsaber became more than a weapon in Sith culture. It became a measure of worth, a way to prove dominance not just through the Force, but through personal skill, through combat. And even when later Dark Lords like Sidious attempted to move away from the lightsaber, dismissing it as crude or outdated, Tulac Hord's legacy forever lingered, because long before the Rule of Two, before Bane, Plagueis, or Vader, there was one Sith who proved the blade could elevate you above kings. Tulac Hord killed thousands of Jedi. Even if you cut that number in half, or by a factor of 10, it's still staggering. Consider this. Darth Vader is revered for hunting down and killing dozens of Jedi during the Great Jedi Purge. Revan and Malak killed Jedi by the hundreds, but mostly through war, not direct duels. But Tulac stands apart, because according to Sith records, scattered and inconsistent, but persistent across time, his kills were not from afar. They were up close with a blade, in the eye of the storm. But there's one more thing that we need to talk about. Just like Exar Kun, there is no recorded defeat that Tulac Hord ever suffered. In all of the bloody records, no matter how exaggerated you believe them all to be, there is no account of Tulac ever losing a duel. No Jedi bested him, no Sith disarmed him, no recorded failure, just victory. But just as we did with Exar Kun, what are the critiques? What are the holes in the argument for Tulac being the GOAT? Well, this one is extremely unique. In the lore, there is no denying it. Tulac Hord was real. He lived. He fought. He killed. His tomb still lies on Korriban, buried beneath layers of ritual, traps, and silence. But how much of what we've heard is actually true? This is where the debate begins, because Tulac Hord is not like other Sith Lords. We don't have named Jedi opponents. We don't have full holocrons. What we have are ruins, fragments, and rumors, many of them written by Sith, who were notorious for twisting history to elevate their own myth. Even the holocrons that do survive speak in riddles. Some contradict each other. Some seem to inflate his kill count, inflate the scale of his rituals, presenting his battles more like legends than actual logs. And maybe that's the point, because to the Sith, Tulac Hord didn't just need to be a man, he needed to be a symbol, a standard for what the Sith could become, a dark mirror, a legend without flaw. Some will argue that his story is more allegory than fact, that he represents the upper bar of Sith potential, the duelist who mastered not only the lightsaber, but the dark side's most aggressive rituals, bending them into a single unstoppable philosophy. They say that the Sith across centuries pointed to him not because he was real, but because he was the myth that they aspired to become. But even those skeptics must admit, he existed, he ruled. His teachings were so dangerous that Sith tribes scattered and buried them, and his techniques reappeared across centuries in the hands of those who studied his legacy in secret. So whether Tulac Hord was a man, a monster, or a myth, his impact was undeniable. Tulac was never defeated in open combat, not once. He outdueled every rival, but in the end, like so many Sith, his downfall didn't come from strength, it came from fear. According to records, his own apprentice betrayed him, not in a duel, not in a formal challenge, but from behind, a blade in the back. By the time Tulac Hord died, it was accepted that no one alive could face him and survive. In the Rule of Two era, betrayal was expected. A Sith apprentice was meant to strike when their master least expected it. Proof of cunning and ambition. If you got close enough to kill, you had earned your place. But Tulac lived in a different age, one where Sith were expected to win through strength, not subterfuge, where battles were fought with honor, brutal yes, but face to face. His apprentice didn't challenge him because he already knew the outcome. He knew Tulac Hord was unbeatable at the blade, so he did the only thing left. He cheated death, not by surviving it, but by avoiding the fight altogether. And so the greatest duelist in Sith history died not in battle, but in betrayal. Not because he was weak, but because no one dared to test his strength head on. So, what do we make of it all? Was Tulac Hord the greatest duelist who ever lived? Did he truly kill over 1,000 Jedi? Was he the master of Makashi before the form even had a name? Or was he just the legend that the Sith Lords told each other in the dark, hoping to become what he represented? What we do know is this: he was real, he was feared, his knowledge was suppressed by his own people. We know that he mastered the lightsaber to a degree that has never been officially surpassed. And he died not because someone was stronger, but because no one could beat him face to face. Maybe that's what makes him the most terrifying of them all. Not just his blade, not just his rituals, but the idea that Tulac Hord didn't just fight the war, that he was the war. and that no one ever beat him. So now we turn it over to you. Was Tulac Hord the GOAT, or just the Sith's greatest myth? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned as we continue the GOAT series with more warriors, more legends, and more cases to make. As always, my friends, I can't wait to hear what you have to say in the comments down below, and as always, may the Force be with you.